Hey everyone, this is John deRoulet with Wheelhouse, Head of Revenue Management Education, and I'm going to talk to you today about getting ready for the booking season. We're hitting booking season hard, and there's a few tips that I want to give you, especially those Wheelhouse users, to make sure that you're ready to go. In this session, we're going to talk about doing a quick audit of your listings and your calendar and your settings to make sure that the rate plan that you have is in line with your strategy and your tactics. What we're going to look at today are a few things as a checklist for you to be able to go through and hopefully get your pricing and your settings in line. First, it's going to be just check your settings. We're going to pull up the portfolio settings page, and there's going to be a few things that we're going to look for here to see if there's any discrepancies or if the complex settings are doing what we want them to do. The second one is we're going to want to spot check specific listings. This might be both your highest performing listings and some of your lowest performing listings, and we're going to check for a few big things. One, is the rate plan you have this year in line with your historical actuals? If it's not, is that something that you're doing intentionally? If your minimums are also in line with the recommendations, we're also going to check for any events or abnormalities both in your historical data and also things that you may not be expecting in the future. Finally, we're going to pull up the portfolio calendar and we're going to take a look at key dates. We're going to spot check those, and we're going to use that opportunity to put down notes and reminders in the system so that those key dates that we're aware of now don't creep up on us as we get busy throughout the booking season. All right, let's dive right on in. This first place here I have pulled up is the portfolio settings page up here. This is a great page because you can see a list of all your listings, and you can also take a look at settings at a glance, as well as in detail by just clicking. First thing I want to look for here is take a look at my minimums and just make sure they make sense. I might do some sorting here. Maybe I want to pull up and sort by bedroom count. And if I sort that here, I can kind of just at a glance see if my minimums make sense. This is really just a gut check. We're making sure we don't have anything that's like really odd or that we accidentally fat fingered in, or maybe we made changes last year and we want to go back in and make sure those changes aren't applying this year. So you can see potentially I brought down my 2-bedroom minimums even lower than my 1-bedrooms. I might want to go in and just spot check this and see if this is something that I want to change. I can also take a look and see just at a glance if the date specifics that I have are there. And if I want to add date specifics, I can go ahead and just use the add new function when I select multiple units to do so. For minimum length of stay, we're going to go ahead and do the same thing. This one tends to be a little simpler because we don't have specific values for every listing in the portfolio. But at a glance, I just want to spot check and make sure that my minimum length of stay strategy is applied correctly for all of my listings. I may also look and decide, do I actually want to change my minimum length of stay strategy? Maybe I want to make it a little bit more granular by season. Maybe I want the any time-based rules I have to drop earlier. I can make those decisions now, but we just want to take a look and make sure whatever I set this up as either last year or the last time I changed it, you can see here I did it 8 months ago, that still applies for what I want to do in this booking season. The next one is we just want to look for consistency. So do I have consistent settings across the board? Some of these lend really well to keeping them consistent, and kind of reverting back to a consistent strategy at the beginning of the year is helpful because we know we're going to make changes as the year goes on. Last minute discount and far future premium are good ones for those. Obviously, minimum length of stay is good. If you have the capability to standardize minimum prices, that's great. One I highly recommend you keep more standardized is going to be seasonality and demand sensitivity. Obviously, there are going to be use cases where you wouldn't do that, but if you can, it's going to make it easier knowing that you might change things in the future and start making it more complex again. Also keep in mind our day of the week settings have been updated. There's quite a bit more options here, so that may be a place that you actually want to improve a setting setup for. The final one is historical anchoring, which is one that you'll probably want to keep pretty much the same across the board. And one of the recommendations we have, which this is a newer setting as well, is that you do this as a time-based rule. You switch this to after and pick a point outside of your booking window. So maybe 90 or 150 days, and then put in either 100 or 105%. And that will keep your rate a little higher up into your historicals outside of that period. Now, this last piece is these complex settings, and I would just do a second check, especially if you're clicking on these and you're seeing that they're set up in a very complex way. Mine currently aren't, but this one has like 4 customizations. I would just spot check anything that seems really, really complex and see if you can reduce the complexity. We know we made a lot of changes because conditions were pretty wild last year. You want to try to bring that back down because we know we're going to have to make changes again next year. And so this last piece is just look for any setting that looks like it's very complex or has been interfered with a lot, and just give it a spot check and see if you need to have it be that complex. The second piece of our checklist is going to be to spot check some specific listings. Now this one, we're just trying to get a sample of listings. You obviously maybe don't have the time to check all of them, but if you can, that would be helpful. And the goal here is just to look at a few big pieces. The first is we really want to compare where our current rate plan is to our last year's bookings. So you can see here that in this current rate plan, I'm actually pricing a little lower than where I was actualizing on some of these peaks. I'll have to decide like, hey, do I think this year is going to be worse? Is that something I'm doing intentionally? If it's not, maybe I want to go ahead and bump the rate up a little bit so that I'm not pricing below. Maybe I want to adjust my historical anchoring. That makes sense. The next one is also to spot check your minimums. It's very easy for people to put in very high minimums. If you see that the rate is consistently being adjusted by the minimum, so let me set this down to like $50 so we can just have an example here. If you see that the rate plan is constantly hitting the minimums, that's an opportunity for you to readjust. Maybe you need to readjust the base rate on the listing. Maybe you need to think if you're trying to price too high this year. Whatever it is, that's an indicator that, hey, I actually need to go in and check this because the recommended rates that are based on the market are really not in line with the minimums I've set. Final piece here that I do like to do as well as just a little check is just go up here and switch this back to data driven. Don't save it. But basically what it's going to do is it's going to set this back to whatever the raw model is. And you just want to see how similar the raw model looks compared to your current pricing. So right now, because this is on, my current pricing was here. I set this back to the raw model. I can kind of see the differences, and that's a great way to see where you have been influencing the rate plan. You may decide to go back. Something I do suggest that people do is if you make a lot of changes to seasonality and demand sensitivity, periodically, just check what the model is doing. I've seen a number of cases where people have made changes to the seasonality, the demand sensitivity, the day of the week, but after all of these changes together, they actually created something that's very similar to just what the raw model is doing. If you find that happening, I would suggest starting back at the raw model and just trying to get to where you want your strategy to be with the least amount of settings as possible. Our final piece of our checklist is going to be to pull up the portfolio calendar. And here, we're just going to spot check our key dates. So you have your list of listings. Maybe if you have different markets, look at it one market at a time. And we're just going to go up here to the upper right, and we're just going to jump to some of our key dates, right? So maybe it's spring break over here. I'm going to spot check the rates, especially in my most important listings, to see that these prices make sense. We already did this a little in our spot check by looking at the historical ADRs versus the rate plan. But here, you can really just hone in on specific date ranges that you find to be the most important. I would identify those most important ranges. Maybe it's spring break, Easter, 4th of July, the entire summer season, fall break. Maybe it's your ski season, President's Day, Memorial, or Martin Luther King Day, whatever it is. You're probably not going to have more than like 5 to 10. So you might as well just glance at them and just scan it. It's going to take you a few minutes. Glance and look at the different listings that you have. I would suggest sorting by bedroom count because that's going to put similar listings a little bit closer together. And then something else I would recommend you do is actually select those dates and apply notes to them. So if you select the dates, you can do this in bulk, hit apply note, label this is X event. And maybe a little bit about your strategy. I'm trying to hold high until Y. Maybe I'm adding 15% now. And then add a reminder to this. Around when you would be concerned about this, you just need to make sure that you set yourself to check. So this is spring break. I really need to check this a month out, I think. So I'm going to check this at the end of February, and I can go ahead and create that reminder. These reminders are going to show up. So when you're scanning the calendar, you'll be able to see that you put these reminders on these dates. So there's a visual indicator for you that these are here when you're looking at things. You will also see the reminders pop up here when you tell them to pop up. And this is a great way for you just to not lose track of what dates you find are important. If you have other people who are helping you in the system, they're also going to help you be able to find out what's important. So quick recap. We're getting ready for booking season. It's a great opportunity to do a little audit of your listings. Suggestion is audit your settings, simplify things as best as you can, and try to make do with as few settings as possible to get to your strategy. That way, as you start to iterate and adjust for what's going on in the market, you're not starting from a point where everything's already different. Second one, spot check your listings. Make sure that your strategy is what you actually expect it to be. Make sure the wheelhouse pricing is what you expect it to be, and double check your minimums. Finally, check your calendar, identify those key dates, set yourself up for success. We know we're going to get busy over the next couple months. So the more tools you have available to kind of remind you like, oh yeah, I really wanted to check this, or just tell you what you're thinking at the time. I think this date's going to be really good. I think this date's going to be really weak, is going to give you a lot of tools in a month or 2 or 3 months from now to be able to do your job successfully. Thanks for your time. Bye.